This podcast is part of the Spoon Podcast Network, home of smart conversations that feed your mind.
Well, hello, everybody, for another episode of Watch What You Eat with Carolyn O'Neill. And of course, on Watch What You Eat, this is a podcast where, we're seeking the very best in food, nutrition, and cuisine. We're going to cover every topic, as we do, from pate to pesticide, working our way through the food world. And, Watch What You Eat is about watching what's happening, watching the trends, telling you what to watch out for to protect your body and your budget. And then we like to watch what are the most beautiful foods in the world that we love to enjoy. And today we have a guest who's talking about something that is a very serious topic, and that is food allergens, the myths, the facts. What are consumers thinking? What are the experts in the medical profession thinking? I'd like to introduce you to Ruchi Gupta, and she's an MD, MPH, and a professor of pediatrics and medicine at the Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine. That, of course, is in Chicago. And she is at the Ann and Robert Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago. And very importantly, too, and I can't wait to hear more about this and what motivated you also to be the director of the Center for Food Allergy and Asthma Research. And we need research because we don't know enough yet, do we?
No. Absolutely not. Research is essential, but we're learning more every day. And there's so much good stuff happening in the field, which I'm happy to and excited to share.
Well, first of all, I think we use the term food allergy. We just kind of throw that term around a lot. And I have the pleasure of hearing you speak to a group of the International Food Information Council. And you talked about there's food allergies. There's food intolerances, and then we have our food sensitivities, some defined, some not, but just kind of give us the lay of the land, if you will, with, severe reactions to food.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just very interesting because food is part of everything, right? That we all do. We eat it every day, a couple times, hopefully. And there are so many conditions that are impacted by food. So when we talk about a food allergy, it is an immune-mediated condition. So it's an IgE-mediated condition. So your immune system is actually recognizing that food as an invader. And that is, so it goes on attack. So those reactions can be stronger. And so you can get immediate symptoms usually, and symptoms like hives, your skin can show it, throat closing, trouble breathing, vomiting. So it can also impact any organ system because it's an immune-mediated reaction. So that's really important for people to know because that is very, very different than, intolerance. So, and some foods can cause both. So for example, a great example is milk, right? You can have a true IgE-mediated milk allergy that's immune-mediated and causes those very severe symptoms. But milk intolerance, lactose intolerance is also very common. So lactose intolerance is when you are missing an enzyme to help digest, the lactose. So when you're missing that, what happens is you feel this bloating and discomfort in your stomach, and sometimes you can have diarrhea, but it doesn't cause that whole anaphylactic reaction. So it's very important to know. And then, we talk about, sensitivities a lot, which are very similar. And a real common one is gluten, right? So a lot of people feel when they eat gluten, they're just, stomach maybe issues, but also just tired and lethargic. So there's a lot of things, but you can also have a wheat allergy. It's one of the top 9 allergens. So understanding the differences is really important. And what I see is a lot of times people will eat a food and then they'll just stop eating it because they're like, it gave me these symptoms, but they'll never go in to get it diagnosed. And so one of the biggest things is get it diagnosed because some of them have treatments. If you have a milk intolerance or lactose intolerance, there are lactose-free items and there are pills you can take to give you that enzyme to break it down. So important. And even with food allergy now, we have treatments. So we'll get into that. But there are things now progressing. So I just encourage everyone who has something happen to them when they eat a food, go talk to your doctor about it.
Yeah. And before we get into the treatments, which I'm so fascinated with, and that really gets back to the good research that you and so many folks are doing right now. But let's get back to, okay, so true food allergy.
Yeah.
Let's say you said, this is something where your immune system essentially reacts pretty quickly.
Yes. Yes. Very usually within minutes, you'll start having symptoms.
Okay.
But it can take an hour, or 2 hours. But usually it's nothing that you're gonna like the next day feel, right? So it's usually though pretty quick. And the top 9 food allergens, let's talk about those. So
Yeah.
you can be allergic to anything, but there's 9 foods that are very common, and those are, we always know a lot of people know about the peanut and all the tree nuts. But then you also have, the most common in adults is actually shellfish. So, you've got your shellfish, your finfish, you've got egg milk, more common in young children. You've got wheat and soy. And the number 9, up and coming one is sesame. So those are the top 9 in adults and in kids. Now, there's many others, there's 10, 11, 12, but those are definitely the most common. And what we know is that about 1 in 13 kids have a food allergy. So about 8%. But in adults, we forget about the adults. And we did a recent study on adults, and it's so interesting that almost 10% of adults have a convincing food allergy. So it is very common in both kids and adults. And as I mentioned, in kids, the number 1 food allergens are still the peanut, tree nuts, and then shellfish creeps up as they get older. In adults, it's shellfish, and then they also have the nuts and milk, etc. The other thing I want to also point out is we are gaining so much knowledge now that milk and egg, which are 2 of the hardest ones to avoid, we actually have ways to treat them. So, a lot of people who have milk and egg can eat baked because baking or cooking those elements, egg and milk, and high heat denatures the protein that they're allergic to and allows them to consume it, which is great because everybody likes baked goods, eggs, like cakes and cupcakes and cookies. So I know I'm throwing a lot at you really fast. I'm
No,
sorry.
but this is very interesting. And this is where the finesse comes in with the management, as you pointed out, working with a professional. Now, when I
Yes.
think as a registered dietitian, which I am, no, we're not really encouraging anyone to do Rockies, like in the blender, the raw eggs. What we were saying is when you cook the egg, it denatures the protein, essentially. Heat denatures protein.
Yeah.
And then the casein or whatever protein, I guess, is in milk. That's the offending one. Is it generally a protein that's in a food? So then,
Yes.
if people are allergic to strawberries, even though we don't think of that as being a protein, like a steak, but strawberries do contain a little bit of protein, and maybe that's what we're reacting to, or people are reacting to.
Yeah, potentially. But, when it comes to fruits, that's another thing to make sure you get to an allergist to diagnose, because another condition that's very related is oral allergy syndrome or pollen food allergy syndrome. And what that is you may have environmental. 30% of people, over 30% who have food allergies also have environmental allergies. And so if you have an environmental allergy, and you get symptoms when you eat a fruit of kind of that tingling around your mouth, itching in your mouth, maybe a rash around your mouth, but really just oral symptoms, not anything more than oral.
Does it go into the throat where you have to be concerned about, not being able to breathe and stuff like that? I think it's all connected, right?
Yeah, it is all connected. So sometimes people do start feeling it in their throat, but majority of those cases are not going to go into anaphylaxis, or you're going to need epinephrine or have other, like you won't get full body hives or respiratory distress. So what is important to note about that is know that what you're reacting to in those cases is the actual pollen and not the protein in the food.
Gotcha.
So
Forget my strawberry analogy, people. That was just
No,
introduced a whole nother topic here, which is pollen. And when you think about just foods in general and allergies, I know, working in pediatrics, you certainly are looking at the whole body, right? And I
All
remember reading in the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, I don't even know if they publish it anymore, folks, but it was the MMR weekly report, the Morbidity
yeah,
or Mortality weekly report. And there
right.
was something about mango dermatitis. Okay. And this is
Oh,
where
wow.
I guess whatever is on, not the mango itself, but the peel of the mango could
Yeah.
have, like people were picking them and they had like splotches on their arms where they were carrying the mangoes or eating a mango without peeling it. Maybe that's the dermatitis, I guess, in a way, but
Yeah.
an allergic reaction.
Exactly, but you're not reacting to the protein in that case, right? It's not the immune system, it's the pollen that you're reacting to. So this is why I was like, just, whatever your symptoms are. But the thing about oral allergy syndrome is if you really love that food, then there are ways you can potentially eat it. I mean, my son has oral allergy syndrome to avocado, but he loves avocado. So, sometimes he'll take a Zyrtec or an antihistamine, and he's not that severe with it. It just causes a little itching. So talk to your allergist. Other foods, sometimes if you cook them or wash them really, really well, or, there's ways you can eat those foods safely, and you don't have to just take them completely out of your diet. Both my kids have oral allergy syndrome to many fruits, and my daughter has food allergies. So I live a lot of these conditions every day in my
Well, I'm
house.
glad you could experiment on your own family.
Yeah,
That's terrific. But before we
always.
talk about adult onset, which I think a lot of people are fascinated with, like, hey, how did this happen? Let's talk about kids.
Yeah.
And are there some allergies that children grow out of?
Yes. Oh, yes.
You
So
hear
milk
about that.
is the most common one in young infants, right? Milk is number one, egg, milk. But majority of kids, I would say over 50%, grow out of egg and milk, which is wonderful because they're so hard to avoid. And if they're not growing out of it, we put them on something called a milk ladder, an egg ladder, where you start with those baked foods and then you start moving into, like easier forms. So you do, heated, baked, let's take egg, and then you would go into, a little bit less, and then, slowly into an omelet style where you're cooking it, but you're not really heat denaturing it completely. And so you slowly, then you can do scrambled. So you move them up the ladder and slowly introduce it to them. And most of the times it works really well. So they either grow out of it themselves. My daughter had an egg allergy when she was young, and she grew out of it by age 3. Or we help them grow out of those allergies. Other ones like peanut, tree nuts, shellfish, those are a little bit harder. Only 15 to 20% grow out of those. So yeah, so those are a little more challenging. But wheat, soy, also, have higher rates of natural growing out of, or natural tolerance, we call it.
We're talking to a food allergy expert and physician, Dr. Ruchi Gupta, from Northwestern. And one of the things that's fascinating everyone right now is the question, the mystery, how does it happen? Adult onset allergies. Like I could eat clam chowder my whole life, scallops, oysters, mussels, clams, and all of a sudden, age 26, 28, I got super sick eating mussels. And I don't think it was the mussels because then I tried all the other categories and still had that allergic reaction. What's going on? Is it overexposure? Did I eat too much clam chowder as a kid?
Oh my goodness. If I had the answer to your question, yeah, I don't, it is the biggest question people ask, right? Like what's happening? Because in our study, we found like 10% of adults have food allergy. And like you said, shellfish is the most common. But 50% of adults said they developed a new allergy as an adult. So that was really surprising to us. So adult onset food allergy, we used to think it was just the kids, but not anymore. You can develop it at any age. So we did ask, what do you think caused it? Did anything change in your world around that time? And a couple of factors that we're looking at, along with a lot of other investigators around the world, for women especially, hormones can play a role. So we do see food allergies developing or tolerance developing, either during puberty, during pregnancy, and menopause. Like those are 3 stages where many women say either they develop something or they grew out of it or, stopped it. And so hormones play a role, other things, viral infections, what's turning on that switch, So infections, bacterial, viral, moving locations, environments, something in the environment triggered it to turn on. So we don't have the complete answer. I don't think it's eating too much of it. I'm glad you got to enjoy a lot of it when you did. So none of that we know well yet. We do know that if you eat something once as an infant, like, so we have this whole peanut introduction, early introduction, which is something I'm doing a ton of research on right now, is early food introduction. And we have a little poem. It's through the skin, allergies begin. Through the diet, they stay quiet. And
Wait,
the
can you
point
say that again?
through the skin, allergies begin. Through the diet, they stay quiet. So another thing is, if you have broken skin, dry eczematous skin, the skin barrier we don't talk about, but it's all microbiome, right? And healthy skin is your protection. And if these proteins get in through broken skin, you've got all these immune cells right under, like watching. And if they see one of these, are they triggering a reaction? Are they saying, okay, it's an invader? It's like, you go to a concert and you accidentally go in the back door and alarms, sirens go off and everybody comes, like to figure out who you are and why you're here. And you've got a ticket, but you just went in the wrong way. But all of a sudden you need to get out of there. So that is one thing we're learning is early in life. That's why eczema is the number one risk factor for the development of food allergies. So introducing peanut products through the gut early was found, especially in high-risk kids with eczema, to actually prevent that peanut allergy or reduce
Wow.
it.
So that's
So
definitely something you'd have to do under a physician's guidance, I would imagine, right? I mean, or what are pediatrics? What how does that work? I mean, you're like, okay, everybody, you're a baby, gather around. We're all having a little bit of peanut now to see what happens.
yes, well, we had said for low risk kids, if you have no eczema, there's no, just introduce it. Introduce it, not your first food, but maybe your second, third, fourth food. And it's just watered down peanut butter, easiest way to do it. Not crunchy peanut butter, but just the soft, normal peanut butter. Mix it with, breast milk, formula, applesauce, whatever you want, just to get it thinned out, and introduce that to your infants. Now, we also encourage introducing all the other foods. You can introduce milk if as yogurt early. I know cow's milk isn't recommended before 1 year, but yogurt's really healthy and it's great for the microbiome, the gut microbiome as well. Eggs, introduce those early. And then any of the other foods that your family eats, if there's a lot of shellfish, introduce it to them early, or finfish, or wheat, soy, sesame. So we're really encouraging it's food, just to introduce it. And the positive of what we're learning in babies is if they're going to react, if you do go slow, you'll start seeing a reaction early, and they don't typically go into anaphylaxis. Most common symptoms in babies are a rash, hives, or vomiting, and not respiratory and all the others. So we are encouraging parents to just introduce. If they're nervous, of course, contact an allergist and go in and do it under supervision. But every child does not have to.
And, really, I guess, even as old as Dr. Spock, the pediatrician of fame, and before him, I'm sure too, was introducing foods individually, right? When you introduce solid foods, just to see how they're doing. I mean, that's sort of probably something now in modern science is something like, yeah, good idea.
Yeah, I do think it's okay to introduce foods individually, especially the allergenic foods. I think honestly, I'll tell you, as a pediatrician and mom, I think we've medicalized infant feeding too much. If you think about society in general, it'd be whatever you're eating at the dinner table and you kind of mash it up, and stick it in your baby's mouth. So I want people to really feel free to feed their babies. And not medicalize it like, oh no, I'm watching them like a hawk when they eat bananas or avocado to see what's going to happen. Babies are very resilient and they will be okay. oftentimes we're trying to change this, but this 3 to 5 day rule between foods, I think it's decreasing diet diversity, and so do a lot of my colleagues. So we're trying to change it, but like one new food a day is great, because like I said, if you're going to have that allergic reaction, it happens pretty quickly. It's not something that happens in 3 days. So one other thing that, as in the allergy field, we're really pushing is diversity. Diversity of diet. Get as many foods into that baby. Let them eat, let them enjoy, just like we do. And trying new foods, and then combinations of food, and then eating with you at the dinner table, whatever you're eating. Just like,
well, parents, grandparents, any caregiver, that is some good news from Dr. Gupta to say, and here, oh, wow, that's great. Hey,
yeah.
let's talk about labeling. Okay,
Oh,
because you think that would be, a consumer's friend, and there's different kinds of labeling. There's free from. We'll talk about free from labeling. Then there's
yeah.
what you call, or is a category of lifestyle or pseudo free from. Let's break it down.
Oh my goodness. Okay. It is really confusing for people. And I really, a call I had today, one big thing we're working on, we're having a policy conference, if anyone's interested, in Chicago, because the precautionary allergen labeling too is what it's called, where, you talked about free from, but then there's also, may contains and
Yeah.
manufactured in facilities. And
Yeah.
people don't know what to make of that. And some people I've seen with allergies will just eat it, if it doesn't say contains, and some avoid it completely. And the problem with it is there's no standard. Like, it doesn't mean it contains less than a certain amount of that allergen, or may contain less than a certain amount. It's just, it may have come in touch, cross contact with it somewhere along the way. So my advice is, if it is a free from statement, those are pretty good. So what is regulated by the FDA? What's regulated is if it contains one of the top 9 allergens now. So sesame got on this now. So peanuts, tree nuts, shellfish, finfish, wheat, soy, egg, milk, sesame. Okay. If it contains any of those allergens, it has to be clearly labeled. So it should say contains, or it's bolded in the ingredients, so you should see it easily. Now, what's not regulated is the precautionary allergen labels. So any of the may contains or manufactured on, those are, industry puts it on themselves. So people don't know that. And there's no real difference between may contain and manufactured in a facility. I think they're just trying to be as clear as they can, the industry people, but it doesn't mean it may have more or less. And so I would take that with some caution and talk to your allergist, because they can do what we call a threshold test. So you can have a little bit of the food, and if you're doing okay, then you have a high enough threshold you can eat may contain. For
So
example,
not zero tolerance, not zero
yes.
tolerance.
Oh,
So
no one
dairy free, if it says dairy
zero.
free or nut free or peanut free or allergen free, I can't imagine it's zero. I don't know.
I mean, if it says free, they're pretty much guaranteeing it. But I really encourage people to do oral food challenges for foods, because we did it with my daughter before she went to college, and she was scared, but her numbers had gone low. Well, she did react, and she did have a pretty severe reaction, but after half a peanut, right? So what was great about it is it opened her world to a lot of those, precautionary allergen labels, may contains, and she didn't worry about that anymore, because she knew her threshold was a larger amount. So I think it opens up your world a little bit more if you know that you can tolerate a higher amount. So highly encourage that. But we're hoping in the next couple of years, we'll be able to change those labels to actually put on thresholds. So like a number, so you would know it contains up to this much. And then you could go to your doctor and try up to that much or a little bit more and feel more comfortable and open up your world to eating more foods.
Wow, that's terrific. And you also talked about the lifestyle and pseudo free from, like, I'll list them. That was just from my notes from your presentation.
Oh, yeah.
Vegan, school safe, Okay, that doesn't sound like it's, I don't know what they mean there.
Yeah,
Plant-based, we know what they're trying to say, and
yeah.
allergy friendly, or it might, I've even seen gluten friendly, or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I do. We see all these things everywhere, and most of it isn't very regulated. But, and I think all of it comes with good intentions. People are really trying to be able to label things to the best of their ability to make people feel safe or, warn people. And ideally, getting it to a point where everything was labeled with some kind of a threshold, like free from, you're completely safe, or threshold up to 10 micrograms, or, something where you had a better idea. But if you want to move into treatments, the great thing is now we have an ability to increase people's threshold to food allergens. You ready?
Yeah, ready.
All right. Um, I've been in this field for 20 years, and like I mentioned, I have two kids who are allergic, and they're adults now, and I have seen so much positive change, and I'm so excited because we are doing so much research and learning so much more, and now we have treatments to offer. So if you have a true IgE mediated food allergy, there's a couple things you can do. So oral immunotherapy is one of them, and what that is introducing a small amount of the food.
And that's like with the peanuts and the
Yeah,
babies.
yeah.
Okay. Oral immunotherapy. Okay.
OIT for short. And it can be done really with any food. But what you're doing is you're introducing a small amount of the allergen and then increasing it. You're doing it with an allergist and updosing. And then you keep updosing with your allergist until you can tolerate, almost a whole peanut. And then you eat, say, a peanut a couple times a week just to keep your body remembering it. And then you feel much safer in the world. And you can do this, for any of your allergens. So that's one. The other one that's getting popular is sublingual immunotherapy. So same idea, small amounts increasing. Everything immunotherapy is going to be small amounts going up. So sublingual immunotherapy is like drops under your tongue.
Little drops of like maybe a tiny little solution or dissolved amount of the offending allergen.
Yep, exactly. And you just put it, my daughter's doing it right now. You just put a little bit under your tongue. And you can also do it for environmental allergies now. So food and environment, and a little bit under your tongue daily, usually 2 to 3 times a day. And then they'll increase the amount of allergen in it slowly, with your allergist, like I mentioned, and then get you up so that you can tolerate, a certain amount. And that way, again, a little more freedom. You're not cured, but you have more freedom and you feel safer in your environment. And then the third one is, it's not, the third one that's approved is a biologic. So it's omalizumab or Xolair, and it's a shot, but it increases your threshold to pretty much any food. It's food agnostic, right? It's an anti-IgE, that IgE I mentioned. So it's a shot. You take the first 3 doses with your allergist just to make sure you're okay. But after that, you can take it on your own at home. And it's just once or twice a month, depending on your weight and your IgE. Your allergist will work with you. And then you just take it, and it increases your threshold to pretty much all your food allergens. And then the fourth one that is so close to coming out is another immunotherapy, but it's on the skin. It's like a patch. So we call it epicutaneous immunotherapy because it's a patch on your skin. So that one you just put on, and then you change it out, and based on what your allergist tells you. And again, small amounts of allergen that your body gets used to. So, and then there's others that are on their way. Like what's so great is a lot of research is happening in this space right now.
Well, that's so important because, we always think about like the finite universe of being in your own kitchen or, doing your own grocery shopping, making your own food. That is not reality. I mean, we are traveling around the world. We're certainly dining out. And, a lot of people have asked me this question. Did it just happen that when you go to a restaurant, they now ask any allergies at this table? Now, what I like about that is obviously maybe it's a liability thing. That's okay because maybe you forgot to tell them that, you're allergic to asparagus. But it also, once they know, then the kitchen knows, right,
Yes.
ahead of time, and they're the ones putting the recipe together.
Yeah.
And it's really impressed me at so many different restaurants. Well, I say, oh, I'm allergic, to mollusks, but not crustaceans. And then they'll be very specific. Oh, this comes with a sauce, a seafood sauce. I'm not sure if maybe mollusks are involved there.
Yeah.
So I think restaurants have come a long way too.
Oh, I think it's just so wonderful. Like and my my kids make fun of me because every time we go out to eat and they ask, I'm like, "Oh my God, you don't know how much I appreciate this. This is my whole world." And they're like, "Please don't do that anymore. Just say no. Just say yes. Just give them an answer. They don't want to know what you do for a living."
Yeah.
So, but I am so grateful because, one of the biggest things we see is teenagers who have food allergies going into young adults and going to college, and they don't want to be different, and they don't want to be the one to be like, "Oh, excuse me," like I also. So when a waiter asks beforehand, it just makes you just feel like so much better about answering that question, normalizes it, and
Yeah.
so I think it's just such a wonderful thing that's happened. And I think the awareness has increased so much in 20 years. Even other families, like when my kids would go to a birthday party, like even in the invitation, some of them say, "Are there any allergies, dietary restrictions I should be aware of?" And it's just, instead of you having to ask, they are telling you they care and normalizing it for you.
Yeah,
So
I think it's terrific. And, just in winding up here, I did notice at Northwestern University, there is even a guide for students who may have food allergies and intolerances and how to handle that. Talk to their roommate, be
yeah,
ready with their EpiPen if it's so needed. Because I do
yes.
have another quote from you, which is, "We are at the dawn of new and emerging therapies, but keep your EpiPen handy."
Yes,
Okay. And again, it is exciting that people can prepare themselves to be out in the big world and maybe have a greater, be able to consume a little bit more so it doesn't become a life-threatening situation.
absolutely.
And again, around the world, there's different allergens too. I saw in menus in Europe and in the UK, lupines, certain kinds of beans. So
That's right.
it is also globally dependent.
It is.
We are talking in May, Dr. Gupta and I, which actually to be it's food allergy month. Did you know
Yeah,
that?
it
Yes, of
is.
course you
Yeah.
do. Of course you do. But people will be listening to your podcast, this interview, who knows when,
Yeah,
any month of the year. And thank you so much for helping everybody
of course.
watch what they eat,
Yeah.
and tell everybody what to watch out for. And of course, end of the day, your research is helping people enjoy the pleasures of dining and the table together with family and friends. And so that really is terrific.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And, we say that we want, when I sometimes see kids, even mine, we want them to, um, not eat to live, but live to eat, right? Like you want to enjoy that food. And I feel like a lot of times with food allergies, you're just eating to live, and that is not a good feeling. So I have tons of hope. And when you mentioned that quote, so it's an epinephrine, and now I can't even say instead of EpiPen because that's one type. But what's so great in that space is we have so many more. And we can't even say epinephrine autoinjector because we have our first nasal epinephrine. And this, I mean, my daughter had a reaction recently and she carries both, but they work so quick and so well. So I really encourage people to carry, there's choices now. Epinephrine autoinjectors, ones that talk to you. There's a nasal, there's going to be another nasal, and there's a sublingual where you just put it on your tongue coming out. So I just wanted to mention those. I know we're
Thank you. No,
closing,
thank you.
but
Because here on the Spoon Podcast Network, of which my podcast is a part of, we are all about health tech
yeah,
and food tech. And that is just medical tech to
yeah,
help people live better lives. And that certainly is a great example because we all know how expensive those injectors had been, maybe too expensive for people to even afford to have in their
yeah.
in their possession. But thank
Oh,
you so much. And another tip I just want to end on, when the waiter or the server comes to the table and they ask about, are there any allergies here? I generally, to kind of crack the ice and get everybody laughing, I say, yes, I do have a very serious allergy. And the server leans in. I said, I'm allergic to an empty wine glass. And and then usually the server goes, oh my gosh, me too. It is so common. It is so incredibly common. We will make sure that you will never find an empty wine glass at your table, Carolyn. Thank you so much. Well, Dr. Gupta, thank you. And thank you for joining everybody. I hope you've learned a lot about food allergies and what to do and how we can have food without fear.
Yes.
And of course, everyone listening is always invited to add Watch What You Eat with Carolyn O'Neill to your podcast menu.